It was a speakership unlike any other. Representative Sean Jasper engineered a surprise upset to take hold of the gavel in 2014, and then this last week became the first speaker since 1955 to step down to lead a state-level department as commissioner. Safe to say he has taken the road less traveled, and it has made all the difference. Former Speaker Sean Jasper joining us this morning. Sir, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
So if you had to walk into a high school civics class at Alvern High School and answer the question, why was Sean Jasper Speaker of the House, what would you say?
That's an interesting question. I think probably because the majority of the members of the House didn't want to go back down the path we'd gone down from 2011, 2012. They saw what was coming, and that wasn't acceptable.
Mm-hmm. And you hear a lot of those people who had supported former Speaker O'Brien, and that was sort of that fracture. They say again and again, the Liberty Conservatives, it's because of Speaker Jasper that we're divided. It's the Speaker's fault. You don't hear the opposite side of that, the sort of the other trajectory, which is maybe if we had gone the other direction, we would not have the majority still. We wouldn't have elected a Republican governor in 2016. We wouldn't have even had a Republican House elected in 2016. I mean, is that an argument you would make?
Well, I certainly would make that argument. I mean, if you look at the reality of what happened in the election in 2012, there are 7,383 legislative seats in the country. 170 Republican seats were lost in that election, roughly, and roughly 120 of those 170 were lost in New Hampshire. So I think it's pretty clear that that was a mandate against the direction we had been going, and the fact that we were able to hold a majority for 2 terms, I think said that, yeah, we did the right thing.
The verdict of the voters certainly speaks for itself. You're a proud Republican, a conservative to be sure. Does it sting when members of your own party say that you are not those things?
It certainly does. I mean, I think what we're seeing is there is a faction that is trying to take the Republican Party in a direction it's never been. If you look at the proud Republican heritage of New Hampshire and look at who we had as governors, I'm more of that model. We were able to get things done. We had low taxes, we had low spending, but we had government that provided for the needs of the people of the state of New Hampshire. Now we have people that, you know, in this last budget cycle we saw, well, let's just cut $200 million. Well, where? Well, we don't know. It's just, even though we had the revenues and we had the justification, it was just a matter of cut, cut, cut. It's that libertarian model that government doesn't need to exist. I don't think that's something the people of the state of New Hampshire support.
You talk about that old school way of doing things. Representative Gene Chandler is now the Speaker. In 2005, you were on the floor recommending his expulsion based on some of his campaign finance violations. Is that sort of what that old school philosophy embodies, that you might get into a big fight, a very bitter one, on the floor of the House, but you can eventually put that behind you and continue to work forward for the betterment of the people?
Exactly. I mean, I think that Representative Chandler would admit that he made a mistake then. And he worked through that. The people of his district have reelected him. He hasn't repeated that mistake. He appointed me to his leadership team a couple of times. I appointed him to my leadership team. You know, you get over these things, but you recognize there are mistakes and you work through them, and that's exactly what we did.
Mm-hmm. And that trajectory of politics is moving away from that. Any idea how to bring that back?
Well, I think people need to look at who they're electing. You know, this idea that that we have Republicans, people who claim they're Republicans, saying that in fact we can even entertain the idea of seceding from the United States. That needs to be rejected. That's not a Republican value, and if you believe that's an option, you can't be a Republican, and people need to move away from that and say, okay, we need to look for somebody who does represent belief that America is the greatest nation on the face of the earth, and that we want to continue to be part of it, and we will continue to be part of it.
In your farewell address to the House, you also talked about this idea of the sort of unlimited ability to file bills in the House. If you're going to have a volunteer legislature and maintain that purity of conscience and purpose, while also sort of restricting that, I guess, is that one way to do that, to get more people involved? If there's less work to be done by the legislature, you might be able to see more working people get involved in the House.
Well, exactly. I mean, I came in to the legislature under the first annual session that we'd had in a number of years, And the idea was we were going to do an annual budget, which of course we haven't. But I think that we should have restricted the number of bills in the second year of the session. The idea that we have 1,100 bills this year, which is roughly the same as last year, is ridiculous. There aren't 2,200 things that need to be fixed in the state of New Hampshire legislatively. And so you just can't ask people to give up that much time year after year for $100 a year. We're the most open process, and we're paid the least. And to say that, all right, you get an idea and you can put a bill in, but after that you need to look for co-sponsors, because you're going to need ultimately, you know, 212, 213 people to agree with you between the House and the Senate. And if you can't come up with 7 to agree with your idea to begin with, maybe it's not an idea whose time is ripe.
Speaking of ideas that will be considered in the House next year, Medicaid expansion. We're seeing a reform effort. Do you think that's going to pass?
Well, as I said 2 years ago and continue to say, if we can find a way that doesn't cost the taxpayers of New Hampshire any more money, I think that it will probably pass, because that makes some sense. But if we're going to have to start to put another tax in place or cut other programs to do this, it probably won't.
Let's shift over to your new job at the Department of Agriculture. What issue are you most interested in getting your hands on and really starting to work on there at Department of Ag?
Well, I think the issue, or maybe not an issue, but the area that I really want to look at is connecting the small farmers to the markets. I think we can do a better job on the website. That's something that Governor Sununu has really wanted to upgrade, and there's a lot of effort and a lot of money going into that website. People ought to be able to put in their current location and say, you know, I'm looking for some organic beef or vegetables or whatever, and get a map where those farms are located, so that we can do a better job of connecting those areas. I think that's going to be important. We've got 4,000 farms in New Hampshire. Most of them are relatively small, and they need to have those markets, and that's where we can help them. The big farms already have their markets, but it's very difficult for some of these smaller farms to really sell what they have if people don't know about them, and I think that's where we can help.
There was much hand-wringing among 2 of your fellow Republicans on the Executive Council about your lack of modern experience in agriculture. First, does that matter? And second, do you feel like you need to literally and figuratively get your hands dirty once you're there at Department of Ag, or is this just a management position?
Well, I think you have to have an understanding of what's going on out there in modern agriculture. It's more than administrative, but it certainly is that. But you have to have a feel for what's going on. But you don't have to know anything. And the idea that somebody had to be a farmer currently to do this job, again, as I've said over and over again, I think that to a large degree is a disadvantage, because whatever commodity you're in, that's going to be the area you focused in. My area has been more one of looking at everything that's going on in agriculture, following all the trends, versus if I was in production, I wouldn't be very concerned about things going on in another area, because I'm making my living doing that. And so I think that I can bring a broader view into the agency.
Do you worry at all that you'll have a harder time as an elected official? You're a follow your conscience kind of guy. That doesn't always work on the bureaucratic side of things. Is it going to be an adjustment, do you think?
Well, there will certainly be an adjustment. There is an advisory committee which I expect to lean on fairly heavily to get opinions on where we should go. But a lot of it is common sense, you know, and having a basic understanding and listening to the constituency. And trying to just cut through some of the bureaucratic red tape. I mean, that's always a problem, and you know, one of the things that's going on now, and we've had a assistant veterinarian position vacant for almost 2 years, and it's been even within the department and the state trying to cut through that red tape. Got to figure out how to make that work better. We can't have these important positions not being able to be filled because of the bureaucracy. So it's something that is going to be a challenge.
Yeah. One last item on the House there. You've served in that body across 4 decades. You had some advice for what Republicans should do earlier, but from a broader perspective, seeing the trajectory of New Hampshire and sort of where its politics are going, what would your advice be to voters about what they should do moving forward here in this state?
Well, I think they need to communicate with their representatives. People say all the time, well, my representative, my constituents want me to do thus and so. I'm like, really? Well, how many did you hear from? Well, half a dozen. You know, and that shouldn't be acceptable. With email and everything else we have out there, it's very easy to connect with representatives. And when they do things like they did, now it was a secret ballot, but some people have made their positions pretty clear. I think their constituents ought to reach out and say, knock it off. Stop playing these games. We want government to work for us. We don't want game playing. And just because you have a position, I didn't elect you for your particular position on an issue. You're supposed to represent me. That's, I think, why I was so successful in town politics for so many years, because it wasn't about my particular position. It was about representing the people of Hudson and Pelham in the legislature.
All right. Former Speaker Sean Jasper, soon to be commissioner, sworn in on the 11th. That's right.
That's what we're targeting right now, is the 11th.
Thank you for sharing some of your Sunday with us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.